Hello, all you patrons. Here we are with another pre-show. Gather round.
Welcome, welcome, thrice welcome on this amazingly bereft day.
Bereft? What?
Bereft, as in we have been bereaved, as in we need a bereavement ministry from a local parish to come and hold our hands. We have lost two, count them, two in the past week. Two very important historic figures, one from church and one from state.
I missed the state one. What was the state one?
His Majesty King Constantine II of the Hellenes, the King of Greece.
Oh.
Who actually, his mistreatment in 1974 is part of what crystallized my thinking and allowed me to accept the fact to myself that I was a monarchist.
Wow. I didn't even know Greece had a king.
Not anymore. They've got scumbags running the show. But they used to have kings till they had scumbags. Pieces of garbage. Worthless, creatures with names like Karamanlis and Papandreou. All of them outlining their own pockets at the people's expense. But thank God they don't have kings.
Was Prince Philip from that royal family?
He sure were.
Oh, okay.
See, what happened was this. In the 1830s, Greece revolted against the Ottoman Empire and were assisted in doing so by Britain, France, and Russia, which was a little bit tough for the Ottomans to resist. But it was a long struggle, and the Greeks fought very, very bravely. Well, Turkey finally accepted the inevitable, and Greece became independent. So now the powers who had helped get them independence shopped around to find them a king. And they found a member of the House of Wittelsbach, the Bavarian kings, Prince Otto, who became King Otto of the Hellenes. But after 30 years, Otto and his new subjects had problems, issues, difficulties. And so he was overthrown in a rebellion. But instead of declaring scumbag republic, which would fall to their descendants later, the Greeks went back to the powers and said, can you give us a new king? We don't like the old one. So they gave him the younger son of the King of Denmark, of the House of Glücksborg. And he became King George I of the Hellenes, the father, the ancestor of the current dynasty, which is why the Greek royal family is called the House of Glücksborg. But to this day, they're all princes of Greece and Denmark. Now, Prince Philip was the son of a younger brother of the then king. And so until he became Duke of Edinburgh and renounced his Greek titles, he too was a prince. He was a Glücksborg and a prince of Greece and Denmark. And after World War II, Greece fought a terrible civil war between the communists and the royalists. Oddly enough, the communists were supported by Stalin and the royalists by the Western powers. The royalists won, but as the 50s went on, Greek politics became increasingly difficult. The king, King Paul, was very wily in dealing with the politicians and fairly effective at it. But he died in 1964, which is an early memory of mine, him dying and his very young son, Constantine, becoming king. Constantine II, who just died. So for a couple of years, Constantine tried to maintain some sort of balance as things got crazier and crazier and crazier. And in the end, the army got tired of everything and overthrew the government. Well, now the king had a problem, which is he was the guarantor of the Constitution, on the one hand. On the other hand, things really had gotten out of sanity. There was, again, this is something I saw as a young boy. It was sort of in the background, like Vietnam and the Arab-Israeli war and all that. So finally, the king decided to try to pull a coup against the military and restore the Constitution. It didn't work. And so he and his family left the country very quickly. And for the next few years, until 1973, the fiction was maintained that Greece was still a kingdom and the king was still in charge, but the army was simply running it for him. Then the army in 1973 had a plebiscite that was rigged, of course, and they brought in a republic. The following year, however, the thing collapsed because they lost a showdown with Turkey over Cyprus. Well, all the old politicians who had put the country into the position it had been in the first place came crawling back from their rat holes. And they had a referendum on the monarchy in which the king was not allowed to campaign. Neither were the royalists. The king was allowed to make a television address to the nation, and that was it. And that, I mean, this man risked his life for his country. And the beneficiaries were these politicians who had been enjoying themselves in exile or not all during the years of the junta, and then they came running back like rats to the trough. And I looked at that, and now with his death, they're mealy-mouthed saying things like, well, it's the end of an era, the period that he symbolizes is gone, and blah blah blah. It'll be judged by history. But how about the system itself getting judged by history that produces scumbags like that? How about that? Oh, I see. They're the choice of the people. The problem is all the people ever get to choose from are scum. So who makes that decision? You've got scumbags A and scumbags B. Now, which bunch of scumbags are you going to vote for? I think we're missing something in all of that. Maybe voting for scumbags isn't a good thing. Maybe just having scumbags to choose from isn't good.
Wasn't this reminded me of some old-timey game show we were talking about, where what
scumbags A, scumbags number 1, scumbags number 2, scumbags number 3. Your choice.
No, I mean, what wasn't there an old-timey game show where it's like what's behind door number 1 or door number 2, door number 3, and you could pick
truth or consequences.
Truth or consequences. Interesting.
Today all we get are consequences and no truth. Today we get consequences and consequences. But no, I mean, I hate to get all excited about it, but I looked at that whole mass of garbage and I thought, no. The fact is, whatever his failings, and I'm sure he had some, he was young, he made mistakes, but whatever they were nothing like the unending horror of Greek politics. And see, that in turn got me thinking about various other monarchs of recent times who put their country over their own well-being. Leopold III of Belgium, Umberto II of Italy, Manuel II of Portugal, Alfonso XIII of Spain. All of these people who were willing to lose everything for the good of their people. Now, you look at that, you look at the fact that you've got an institution that produces whatever their imperfections, shall we say, are willing to do that, and yet this is bad. What's good is a system that produces endless numbers of scum to feed off the public trough and act as parasites on the body politic. And that's good because people can vote for them.
I was listening to a lot of Father Ripperger this past week, and he had such a funny line that I feel like you'd appreciate, because he was talking about, I don't know, civics and stuff. And he said, because he was talking about how everything is socialistic and communistic. He said, God wants 10%. Who the hell are you to ask for more than that?
Good question.
Isn't it? I thought that was such an interesting. God wants 10%.
It's a very good question, and the answer is our lords and masters.
Oh man, yeah.
So, but that's only one historic figure we lost this past week. We lost another. Now I never met King Constantine, and now that he's dead, I'm not likely to this side of the grave. But the other man I did meet, and he was Cardinal Pell of Australia.
Yeah.
And in the immediate wake of Benedict's death, this is very interesting, because after Benedict dies, Archbishop Genswein rushes, his book comes out, which is kind of a scathing indictment of Pope Francis's dealings. Well, then Pell dies, and it's revealed almost immediately. Last year, you may remember, there was a document circulated amongst the cardinals that got out to normal people. And it basically was, on the one hand, a scathing attack on the current pontificate's way of doing things, and on the other, advice for what the next conclave should be looking for in terms of a new pope, in terms of what the church actually needs. Well, this was issued under a pseudonym, Demos, and it was revealed after Cardinal Pell died that he was in fact the author.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow, indeed. So if you want to know Cardinal Pell's last will and testament for the church, it's that document.
What's the name?
Well, I suppose if you looked up Pell and Demos and cardinals.
So how do you spell Demos?
Demos.
Okay. I'm definitely reading that. But I mean, it makes sense for him to have the courage to do that after what he's been through. That it's like, what are you gonna do to me? You know.
And now that he's dead, all they can do is dance on his grave or ship his body off in a minivan the way they did for Benedict XVI.
It's getting to a point where they don't have enough dump trucks and bulldozers and machinery to haul all of that reality away. Like to haul of all, you know what I mean? Like they're trying.
Yeah.
Like I get the sense where it's like, I'm remembering your line where it's like these people are fighting reality.
Yeah. And if you fight reality, one day reality, after taking all of your blows, just comes up and pops you in the nose.
Yeah.
You fall on the floor. Now, interestingly enough, one of the rumors that's flying around now, generated by Una Voce Mexico, who may or may not know what they're talking about, or may or may not have good information. I don't know. I love Una Voce as an organization, so I certainly am not going to say anything bad against any of its national branches because they do such wonderful work. But the rumor has been put out that Francesco is going to introduce an apostolic constitution, the highest form of papal legislation there is, banning the Tridentine Mass everywhere and all times and all places. I find that hard to believe, but my prediction is that if it does happen, it'll be ignored. And that's not going to be a good thing. Not at all. Because when you do that, again, if you use power improperly, it breaks in your hands. But it doesn't break just in your hands. It also breaks for those who will follow you. It will be very, very hard if Francis does this. It'll be very hard for his successor to restore a great deal of sanity in the immediate. And maybe that's the reason for doing it. Why not? Let's just break up everything. You know, finita la commedia. Let's just break everything. That is certainly the reaction of a child, and the generation in power in the church are very much elderly children in so many ways. I wouldn't want to say in their second childhood, of course. That would be bad.
Fortunately, to me as well, apostolic constitution, I don't think that's how Pope Francis rolls.
No, I don't think so either. And I don't think he'll do it. But he might be a surprise. However, if it does happen, remember that you were told this on January 14th, 2023, the 16th or the 56th, is that right? Gosh, anniversary. Well, 1967. Was that really 56 years ago? That can't be right. Yeah, I guess it was. Man, the 56th anniversary of the Human Bee Inn in Golden Gate Park, which acted as the prelude to the Summer of Love. The Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. What? Oh, I'm not supposed to honor the counterculture that produced most of our leadership today? Have you no reverence or respect for your elders? Let me tell you something, pal. If you're going to San Francisco, be sure to wear some flowers in your hair. Because in the streets of San Francisco, you're going to meet some gentle people there. And for those who come to San Francisco, summertime will be a love-in there. That's right.
Okay.
What do you mean, okay? I've just delivered this marvelous paean to the generation that have shaped the world that you and I live in. And you're just, okay.
Yeah, I know you think that, and I know that the boomer generation thinks that. But as I've said before, I'm unimpressed. And it's okay to be unimpressed. It's okay. You're saying it's not okay to be unimpressed. You're trying.
That's exactly right. I'm saying, let me tell you something. The older half of my generation produced all the crap that's poisoning us today.
Well done. You guys really cornered the market on that one.
Exactly. Exactly. And all the garbage that we're shoving down your throats and have been for decades, you have no gratitude for it. You don't. If I look, you ask, if you're my age, right? And you ask, or older, you ask the average Catholic girl of traditionalist leanings, are you grateful for the fact that women today are looked at by men purely as entertainment value? They never appreciate it.
It's a shame.
No, I would say. And if you say to guys, aren't you grateful that you've been infantilized and kept as effeminate children?
I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid. Okay?
See? And you're not grateful. We did that for you.
In
my day,
okay.
In my day, it was all, oh, you got to grow up now. Oh, you got to be a man. And being a man had a definition, just like being a woman did. But see, we freed you from all that.
I don't even know what to say to you. I don't even know what to say. You're just... You got me wound up in knots. Well done. Mission accomplished. Can we move on to the questions? We're approaching a 20-minute mark. I don't need to be jackhammered into submission, Charles.
All you have to do is give my generation a look of overwhelming respect. That's all you have to do.
I will not bend the knee. All right. No.
I see. So you're bad on racial issues too.
What? How's that again?
Taking the knee. That's the way you show solidarity with the rioters of 2020. Burn, baby, burn. The hot, hot summer of burning love. Taking the knee was the way athletes showed that they were in favor of all that. And you're just basically spitting on all that.
Puh. All right.
Well, all right. That's just that question. All right, fine. Be that way. I don't care. Let's move on. Obviously, you've got a heart made of stone.
All right. Youssef says, "What is English Panto theater? Isn't it just drag?" Ooh.
God help us all. No, Youssef, it's not just drag. Firstly, before my generation sexualized everything and so liberated it from the strictures of non-sexuality, drag was, as so-called, dressing in women's clothing was a gag. It was considered funny. These are two words, funny. that are completely alien to the modern vocabulary. And Panto was simply taking old stories like Dick Whittington and Puss in Boots and so forth, and turning them at Christmas time into funny, zippy plays for children to enjoy. It was not drag queen story hour by any stretch. And then they had some like at the Rainbow's End that were new and were meant to be patriotic and so on. But I will tell you this much. I know how to end Drag Queen Story Hour.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Replace it with Drama Queen Story Hour.
Ooh.
And then this little piece of garbage girl, Goldilocks, was trespassing into different houses, and she breaks into the poor Three Bears house. You can imagine that story is not going to end the way the children want to hear it. Drama Queen Story Hour would become extinct within weeks.
All right. Brian says, Dear Charles, the book I'm reading, Sacral Kingship in Bourbon, France, mentions that prior to the Revolution, Jacobins and Cordeliers were formerly associated with St. Louis IX. What was this connection?
Connection is they were both branches of the Franciscans, the Jacobins and the Cordeliers, and St. Louis was a Third Order Franciscan.
Ooh.
Yeah. That is why if you go down into Oceanside, California, you will come to the mission of San Luis Rey de Francia, because all of the missions were named after Franciscan figures, and the angels. So San Diego is St. Didacus of the Canaries, who was a Franciscan missionary in the Canary Islands. San Luis Rey, of course, was St. Louis, who was a Franciscan Third Order. San Juan Capistrano was, of course, the great Franciscan who led the Christian armies against the Turks. San Gabriel, well, St. Gabriel, the archangel. San Fernando Rey de España, St. Ferdinand, King of Spain, who was also a Third Order Franciscan. San Buenaventura, St. Bonaventure, who was a great Franciscan theologian. San Antonio de Paula, after St. Anthony. San Miguel, after St. Michael the Archangel. Our Lady of Solitude, after Our Lady. And then you've got Our Lady of Carmel, Our Lady of Mount Carmel mission. But then San Francisco, of course, was named after San Francisco de Assis, St. Francis of Assisi. I neglected to mention San Luis Obispo, St. Louis, the Bishop of Toulouse, who was a Franciscan. And then the San Rafael, of course, another archangel. And lastly, but definitely, La Purísima Concepción, which was the Immaculate Conception, which is the doctrine the Franciscans were fighting for at that time. And then the furthest northern one was San Francisco Solano, and he was a Franciscan missionary in South America, in Peru. So the Franciscans were very proud of their background, and St. Louis was definitely connected to it. So that's why. Third Order Franciscan.
You know, it took me a long time. I consider myself like Franciscan in terms of spiritually. And I've read multiple biographies of St. Francis and also one on Junipero Serra. And it only recently occurred to me that Junipero Serra was named after Brother Juniper.
Yeah.
St. Francis is, I guess, one of the initial brothers who were very, very holy.
Very holy, and in his case, wise, considered sort of childlike but wise.
Right.
And of course, Junipero was not his given name. He took that as his name in religion after Brother Juniper.
Right. Well, you know, apparently St. Francis, that wasn't even his name.
No.
It was John, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Giovanni, yeah. He was called Francesco. He was the first one to be called that. because he spoke and sang in French.
Mm.
And that, you've got to bear in mind that St. Francis wanted to become a knight, not unlike St. Ignatius, who
Right.
did become a knight. And he was attracted by, the songs of chivalry and so on and so forth, which were mostly in French. So that's why he learned to speak and to sing in French.
That's interesting.
People have this impression, well, he wanted to be a crusader and all this. And this is why he ended up going to the Holy Land to try to convert the Turk. I mean, he was a much, much more complex character, St. Francis, than the apostle of ecology that they made him in the 70s.
Right, I know. I totally. I said this many episodes ago, probably 100 or so, but it took me to actually read the St. Francis prayer to understand what really St. Francis was all about, because I thought it was all soup kitchen type, St. Vincent de Paul stuff, but you realize that charity is so much more basic than that. And the ecology thing.
And of course, that's why the Franciscans, alongside the Dominicans, A, staffed the Inquisition, and B, were big-time missionaries wherever they were let loose.
Yeah. So many interesting stories. I highly recommend reading some of the biographies of St. Francis. Bonaventure's is good. There's a couple others out there. Chesterton's is good. But he wanted to get martyred down in they wouldn't martyr him though.
No, they wouldn't
nice.
touch him. But they did get Blessed Raymond Lull, who was a Franciscan.
Interesting.
They martyred him. And you know who Blessed Raymond Lull, who's also a philosopher and the originator of what's called Lullism as a philosophy.
Yeah.
Do you know who his major, more recent disciple was?
So I thought it was Junipero Serra for one.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
And he was entombed with a relic of Blessed Raymond Lull. And when they opened up the crypt, it was there intact, and now you can venerate it at Mission Carmel.
Oh, I didn't know that. I did not know that. Darn.
See, you made a mistake that's classic. You did something and went somewhere without consulting me.
I did.
And every night, every day, literally millions of people across the planet make the same mistake. And I've had to live with the guilt all these years of knowing that they haven't, talked to me about, like, say somebody says, I know, I'm going to go to Cleveland. They don't call me just because I've never met them and don't know them from Adam. They don't consult me. It's sad.
We need to monetize that. We need to create like a search engine, like Ask Charles or something. And then
if it can be monetized, I'm all for it.
Speaking of which, what do you got that there? Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Yep.
Wow.
There are the bots. There's Joel.
How'd you get that? Somebody got that for you?
It was given to me by Bill Bursack.
Wow. You brought that over across the Atlantic?
I did.
Wow. All right.
I did indeed. And I got to say that I enjoyed it.
Good. All right.
Your brother-in-law and I, at your sister's wedding, did a duet of the theme song for Mystery Science Theater, and then we did it again at your wedding.
Yes, I am aware that you guys performed it at my wedding.
Yes.
I was subjected to that.
Subjected?
Yeah.
You enjoyed it. At least we didn't do it during the wedding in the church. We waited until the reception. So, be grateful. Okay. We could have done it in the church.
All right. Chicago Jacobite says, Charles and Vincent, greetings from the town Whistler's father helped build.
Indeed.
I'm not familiar with Whistler.
The painter. Whistler's mother is famous because he painted her.
Oh, okay. If either or both of you, for whatever bizarre reasons, come to this part of the world, I will dust off my recipe for Cincinnati chili, where you can get the right kind of bread, and I'll order some chop suey for sandwiches. On to the
So
no thanks,
sounds good.
thanks, but no thanks.
No, I accept on behalf of both of us.
Oh, okay. On to the question. For many years, I have loved Hawthorne's story, The Maypole of Merrymount.
Yeah.
At first, I was surprised that Endicott does not come off a raging monster, but then realized that was probably a result of the author's cultural puritanism at that stage of his career. My interest, though, lies with the little I found 58 years ago about Morton and his colony, and after all these years was about to research it again when I said to myself, you could ask the author of Puritan's Empire his take on Merrymount. What do you think of Morton and his colony? My gut tells me he was probably trying to establish an Anglican settlement when it wasn't yet clear that the Calvinists were going to dominate the territory. What think you?
Well, I agree with you. I mean, it's exactly what the case was. And as Hawthorne does write in The Maypole at Merrymount, jollity and gloom contended for an empire. And of course, gloom won. Uh, it was a sad day for both New England, the Indians, and us that Plymouth triumphed over Merrymount.
Hmm.
It would have been a very different sort of New England had things gone differently, but it didn't. So there we are.
Right. The great question from Sandra, who says, I was having a discussion with a friend. He believes that the Iroquois model of government that was used to help develop America's government was superior to anything Europe ever had. What is Charles's evaluation of the Iroquois model?
Well, firstly, that's a very invidious question to ask a descendant of the Hurons and Algonquins whom the Iroquois were at war with, and especially given what they did to the Hurons, the bloody, nasty way in which they dealt with us. On the other hand, I'm very happy to know a Mohawk chief today who is in Canada and a pillar of the Ordinariate up there. So I'll try to be even-handed.
Okay.
The fact is that as far as the Indian organization went, it was pretty effective. That's why they were able to smack around everybody around them and conquer a good fifth of North America. But in the end, it was ineffective and ineffectual. When the Six Nations discovered that they had differing interests, they split. And that was the American Revolution that did that. The Mohawks, Seneca, some of the other tribes stayed loyal to the king. The Oneida and several others joined the rebels. And that was the end of the Iroquois Confederacy.
So how was it ineffective? I mean,
when push came to shove, the various of the Six Nations' own interests were more important to them than the good of the whole, and there was no effective means of keeping them allied. I mean, the American Revolution was very much our first Civil War, of course, but it was also a civil war for the Iroquois, because some of the nations backed the king and some backed the rebels.
So you're judging it based on that one flaw, or that one
the one flaw
outcome
that caused it to collapse. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Otherwise you're stuck with the thing about the guy that he was in perfect health and it was only his cancer that killed him.
Well, every government ultimately collapses, doesn't it?
Indeed, but the Iroquois Confederacy really didn't last that long as an empire. Maybe 80 years.
I mean, can't you grade other aspects of a government and say, "Oh, well, at least they did this good"? I mean, I feel like you're making it all or nothing on this one aspect.
Well, you could. It's like Brook Farm. It ceased to exist. No, I mean I suspect that Sandra's friend is dwelling in the lofty heights of theory. But the fact is that the Iroquois Confederacy was certainly more effective than any of its neighboring Indian tribes were. But it was not in a position to resist the European onslaught. And as I say, in the end, it collapsed over a civil war that was not its own. The Confederacy was unable to back either the rebels or the king as a whole. And that's why it collapsed.
Okay.
And of course, in the end, those who stayed loyal to the king got a much better deal than those who didn't.
All right. Nicholas says, "Hello, gentlemen. I just finished my first semester of law school, and I'm currently thinking of which type of law I would like to practice when I hopefully graduate and pass the bar. I have had family and marital law recommended to me. However, I have been hesitant since I am not fond of divorce. I've seen many and the effects it has on the children and the basic religious reasoning for not wanting to support in any way or benefit monetarily from it. However, I have been told that while it is unlikely I will ever be able to change marital law in this country, I can at least use my own legal practice and use the laws we already have by doing some good, by trying to get the best outcome for the children who are stuck in such situations rather than simply doing it for profit. I'm still thinking about such a practice, but I would very much like the input of the Tumbler House gentlemen. Thank you for taking the time to read my question."
Well, my immediate reaction is run away from divorce law as fast as ever you can. But he does raise a very important point, I think, about the children not having anyone to stand up for them. Certainly not the parents, who are more interested in their own happiness than that of their children. So I don't know. For me, it's a tough call. What do you say?
It's definitely a tough call. I mean, this really, I myself have faced really difficult prudential judgments in this area where it's like you're dealing with marketing, and marketing is a real gray area where, you know, you can really get hedonistic with it and appeal to the lower vices with it. I mean, in business, there's so many of these prudential judgments. It's really a big landmine. I personally don't know the field of divorce well. Like, as a lawyer, it sounds interesting that you're trying to remedy it. You know, I feel like in business, so often you have to try to make the best and do the most moral thing of tricky and yucky situations that you find yourself into. But at the same time, you're not in that,
No.
you know. So I feel like that's a big challenge. You're gonna have to pray a lot for sure.
Yeah.
Because that's a really tough decision, right?
Extremely tough.
So, but you know, I mean, God is going to have to give you the grace and the insight to make that decision. God's not going to give us the grace to make that decision. That is a privilege for you.
We're not going into law, that's for sure.
Yeah. So,
and you might consider something like contract law where you'd be safe, but never mind.
Yeah. So a lot of prayers, do some adoration, just meditate and let God, you know, speak to you. Don't. My advice is if you know, so many people listen to music, and just this is a time where you really want to have silence in your life, and that what's the line? Like, God always speaks at the same volume, but sometimes you just have everything else turned up, so you can't hear him, right? I thought that was an interesting way to approach it. That's totally correct from my point of view. So yeah, just give it a lot of quiet thinking and prayer, and I'm sure you're going to arrive at a good decision, Nicholas. All right. Final question from Justin, who says, I have a question for Charles. I have often heard, particularly from Eastern Christians, that the First Vatican Council elevated Thomistic philosophy to the level of dogma. Is there any truth to this? If so, how does the ultra-realist deal with this?
No, there isn't. There are two dogmatic constitutions that were issued by Vatican I, neither of which even mentions St. Thomas Aquinas. So I don't know where that comes from. If it comes from things that people said during the course of the council, that's nice, but you're not obligated to believe what people said during the course of the council. You're obligated to believe the dogmatic definitions and nothing else. And you could find them both very easily on the Vatican website. Look up Vatican I dogmatic constitutions, and they will appear magically. Now, they're in Italian and Latin, so if you don't speak either of those, read either of those, Google Translate's your friend.
I see. So I don't have a familiarity with analyzing this type of thing. So when we were dealing with this before the pre-show, you were looking up the name for Aquinas in the document, and you couldn't find it.
I read both of them.
Right.
They're not there.
But I guess my question is it possible that it's there citing, like, dealing with his concepts without his name?
No, not really. What they say about him, what they say about the relationship between reason and thought could be said about him or Bonaventure or any of the other medieval doctors. There's nothing specifically Thomist there. There's a lot of scholasticism there in terms of the relationship between faith and reason. But it's like, oh gosh, I can't think of it now. The Leo XIII encyclical on scholasticism, which is always cited as why St. Thomas is the only doctor we should listen to. The problem is, if you actually read the bloody thing, he mentions St. Thomas and St. Bonaventure in the same breath. So it's always exciting when you actually look at the source. I mean, and it's certainly true. He recommends St. Thomas very highly. That's quite true. But he also recommends St. Bonaventure.
That's such a weird statement because it seems to be exclusive.
Not really.
Well, you said the only. I thought St. Thomas Aquinas is the only.
Well, that's what people say, and then they will cite Leo XIII's encyclical.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
But then if you read the encyclical, he cites St. Thomas, definitely, and St. Bonaventure.
Yeah, a lot of selective quoting going around. A lot of selective quoting.
You know something, Vinny? Of all the people I know, you're definitely one of them.
I will take that to mean that I am the best person you know in the world.
Well, self-delusion is the key to positive thinking. I've always believed that.
Well, little over 40 minutes. So that's it. We've exhausted our pre-show questions. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Pretty fun pre-show. Good to be back in the saddle again, getting a little rhythm. But we're not done yet. Full episode coming up next.
You bet. And just because you guys are dressed in your post-Epiphany pre-Mardi Gras finery doesn't mean that you will overawe our other guests in the next segment. So stay tuned.